So it's like, it's not the same thing, but I'm just curious what you might think about this. You ever read much Nietzsche at all?
In college, she was, one of our
Yeah, yeah,
sophomore seminar voices against the chorus. I think was the theme of the course. So
yeah.
read some of him, read some of Freud, read some of Marx, read some Du Bois. But he's put in that context. But
Yeah, he's got a line in I think Beyond Good and Evil, something to the effect of the real philosopher is more afraid of being understood than of being misunderstood. And the general interpretation of that is if he's understood, then there's sort of no mystery to him. And but I think it's something beyond that. I think it's because it's like if I have been given something a lot of thought and I've this idea, um, and I've spent a year thinking about this thought, synthesizing it, and then I tell you about it, and you're like, oh yeah, well that's because this, and this, and you're able to like connect all the dots right there,
right.
and it's offensive. I'm like, how can you just easily get that idea when I've spent a whole year thinking about this thing, and you're just like, oh yeah, and so it's like, how dare
You,
you
you
just
think
get it
you
like
think
that?
you've had a deep and profound experience resulting in world and humanity changing thought, and the first person you tell says, "Well, duh."
Yeah. But I
I
think
can see
part of
that.
that too is like even if they hadn't thought about that and they're like, oh yeah, and they sort of can connect the dots there, it's like well, part of that is because you've synthesized, you've been able to distill it down to something that's easy to comprehend. And that's a real achievement. And so
Yeah,
it's like,
I would think I would take solace in the fact that if I were able to present something that I thought about in a year, so that somebody else was able to connect dots that they hadn't been able to connect before very quickly, then I would think my goal would be to be understood. But that's a very different thing than somebody saying, "Well, duh." If it
yeah,
inspires them
yeah,
to connect dots, then I guess that's two different responses, which I think I agree mean two very different things.
yeah. I've often had the experience to where I'm bringing something like that or something I've struggled with personally and bringing that sort of experience, strength, and hope. And you deliver it, and the person is like, uh-huh. Anyway, and then they just like keep talking about whatever they were talking about. I'm like, no, not anyway. I'm literally handing you gold on a silver platter here. And you're just like, huh, that's probably that's what grinds my gears.
That's very analogous to something that we were warned about in high school, um, in our church youth group and our confirmation classes when we would go on retreats. We would get we would get the sit down, the debrief on Sunday before we'd go home on a weekend retreat was, now remember, you've had a weekend of reflection and solace and introspection and processing and thought. And you may have come to many conclusions, inspirations, and maybe even some that are revelatory. And you're going to go back to the rest of the world that hasn't done any of this. So, right, they would refer to it as retreat high. You'd come back thinking, you know, profoundly spiritual, and then have this smack in the face that the rest of the world was just as you left it. And why aren't they also thoughtful and introspective and spiritual? Versus the thought, the obvious thing is, well, why would they be? They didn't do any of the thing that you just did, which clearly has
Yeah,
value.
right.
So just be prepared that, yeah, you may have done a year's worth of work on a philosophical premise, or coming to a conclusion, or you know untangling the skein, and you tell someone that, and they're like, and because they haven't invested that level of work and depth, and they're not ready to come to that
Yeah.
conclusion.
It's kind of arrogant of us to come home from this enlightening journey and I'm just going to impart this wisdom on you and your life is going to be much better for it. And you're like, huh, that's cool.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you might appreciate this as a therapist. A very great man I know. was given a profound bit of advice by his therapist that made the light bulb go on, which is, I think I know how I can help you. The whole world is not full of other yous. You are the only you. So stop expecting everyone to see things just as you see them. The only person that sees things the way you see them is you.
That's
Oh,
good. I wish I need to have like this, like my monitor open, and every time I have an experience like that with a client, play that scene from I watched the movie where the guy's like, inconceivable.
Princess Bride.
Yeah, The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Inconceivable that people could think differently than I do. I read a book one time called After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. And it was talking about when you're having these enlightening experiences, and it's like, oh yeah, but like, well, the world still goes around and you have responsibilities, and now you got to go home and do the laundry. Like, how do you come back to the mundane? And and that was really helpful for me in the sense of sort of what we're talking about here. It's like, well, even with others too, it's like, well, it's still another day that I have responsibilities, and I can't expect every day to be this enlightening, blissful experience. Life is not meant to be nothing but aha moments.